Captain Tae-il Kim sat alone in his small scout ship. The dark of space spread out before him like an endless sea. His mission was simple: fly to the edge of human space and look for any threats. After 10 years in Earth's defense force, Tae-il was used to being alone. Just 3 more days, he said to himself as he checked his ship's systems. His dark hair was cut short, and his eyes showed the tiredness of a man who had seen too many battles. A loud beep from his ship's computer caught his attention. Warning: unknown energy readings detected, the computer's voice said. Tae-il moved quickly to the controls. Show me, he ordered. The screen lit up with a view that made even Tae-il, a battle-hardened soldier, catch his breath. 2 massive fleets of ships were fighting. Bright beams of light shot between the vessels. Ships exploded in silent bursts of fire and metal. Computer, identify those ships, Tae-il said. Unknown. No match in database. Both fleets used technology not seen before. Tae-il watched the battle with growing interest. One fleet had sleek, bright ships that seemed to glow with an inner light. The other fleet was made up of dark, sharp-edged vessels that moved like hunting animals. Hide our ship, Tae-il ordered. His small craft powered down and drifted behind a large asteroid. From there, he could watch without being seen. A bright flash caught his eye. One of the glowing ships, smaller but more fancy than the others, had been hit. It fell away from the battle, trailing light and smoke. Tae-il tracked its path as it crashed onto a nearby moon. The dark ships didn't follow. They were busy with the rest of the battle. Tae-il knew he should report what he had seen and leave. That was the safe choice. That was his orders. But something about that crashed ship pulled at him. Computer, can there be survivors on that crashed ship? He asked. Unknown. But life support systems were active before crash. Tae-il made his decision. Set course for that moon. Keep us hidden. The small human ship slipped away from the asteroid and moved quietly toward the moon. As they got closer, Tae-il could see the crash site. The alien ship had dug a long trench in the moon's gray dirt. He landed his ship a safe distance away and put on his spacesuit, the helmet sealed with a hiss. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out onto the moon's surface. The crashed ship was like nothing he had ever seen. Its hull seemed to be made of metal and something like glass, and a soft light glowed from within. As Tae-il got closer, he saw a hole in the side of the ship. He climbed through carefully, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was breathable. He took off his helmet and looked around. The ship's insides were a mess of broken panels and sparking wires. A sound made him turn quickly, rifle raised. There, standing in a doorway, was a figure. It looked almost human, but not quite. Its skin had a soft glow, and its eyes were large and purple. It wore what looked like armor, damaged and smoking in places. Long, pale hair floated around its head as if underwater. Tae-il realized with a shock that the alien was female, and from her clothes and the way she held herself, she was someone important. She spoke words he couldn't understand, her voice musical, but sharp with anger or fear. In her hand was a weapon, pointed straight at him. Tae-il slowly lowered his rifle and held up one hand. I'm not here to hurt you, he said, though he knew she couldn't understand him. Suddenly, a loud crash came from outside the ship. The alien woman's eyes widened. She spoke again, urgently. From outside came the sound of heavy footsteps and harsh voices. The alien woman looked at Tae-il, then at the sounds outside. She seemed to make a decision. She lowered her weapon slightly and spoke again, softer this time. Tae-il understood the situation, if not her words. Whatever was outside was worse than him. I think we both need to get out of here, he said, gesturing toward the back of the ship. Will you come with me? The alien princess looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. And so began the unlikely alliance between Captain Tae-il Kim of Earth and Princess Era of the Luna Empire. Tae-il led the glowing alien woman through the back of her crashed ship. They moved quickly and quietly. Outside, the sounds of the enemy search party grew louder. "This way," Tail whispered, pointing to a line of rocky hills about half a mile away. The alien woman nodded, seeming to understand his meaning, if not his words. They slipped out through a broken panel on the far side of the ship. Tail's training kicked in as he scanned for cover, choosing a path that would keep them hidden from the search party. The moon's low gravity made their steps light and fast. Behind them, harsh voices shouted. The enemy had found the crashed ship. "We need to move faster," Tail said, grabbing the alien's arm. She pulled away at first, but then saw the dark shapes spreading out from her ship. She nodded and followed him more closely. They reached the hills just as shots of energy hit the ground near their feet. Tail pushed the alien woman behind a large rock and fired back with his rifle. The enemies ducked for cover. "Come on," he said, and they ran deeper into the rocky hills. Soon they found what Tail was looking for, a small cave opening, barely visible between two large boulders. Inside, the cave went deep into the moon. They moved about 50 feet in before Tail stopped and turned on his suit light. The alien woman stood straight and proud despite her injuries. Up close, Tail could see that her skin didn't just glow. It had patterns that shifted slightly, like moving tattoos of light. Her eyes were large and purple, with no whites, and her hair floated around her head as if it were underwater. She spoke, her voice musical but firm. Tail shook his head. "I can't understand you," he said, tapping his ear. "My translator needs time to learn your language." The alien frowned, then pointed to herself. "Era," she said clearly. Tail nodded and pointed to himself. "Tail." Era nodded back, then winced and touched her side. Tail saw blood, or something like blood, but with a faint glow, seeping through her armor. "You're hurt," he said, reaching for the medical kit on his belt. Era watched him carefully, her hand near what he guessed was her weapon. Tail slowly opened the kit and took out a scanner. He ran it over her wound and looked at the results. "Your body is different from mine, but not too different," he said. "This should help." He held up a small device and pantomimed pressing it to her wound. Era hesitated, then nodded once. Tail applied the device, which sealed the wound with a soft hum. Era touched the sealed wound, then looked at Tail with surprise. She said something in her language. Tail's translator beeped. "Processing language, 10% complete." "It's working," Tail said. "Soon we can talk." A sound from deeper in the cave made them both turn quickly. Tail raised his rifle, and Era drew her weapon. A sleek pistol that glowed with the same light as her skin. From the darkness came a low, scratching sound. Tail turned his light toward it. 6 red eyes reflected back at them. A creature like a giant spider, but with a hard shell like a crab, crawled toward them. Era fired her weapon. A beam of light hit the creature, but bounced off its shell. The monster charged. Tail pushed Era aside and fired 3 quick shots from his rifle. The first 2 did nothing, but the third hit a soft spot between the shell plates. The creature screamed and fell. But it wasn't dead. It rose again, angrier now. Tail saw a pattern in its movements. When it raised its front legs to strike, its neck was exposed. He waited for the right moment. The creature reared up. Tail fired once, twice, 3 times into the same spot on its neck. The monster fell and did not move again. Tail turned to find Era staring at him with wide eyes. She said something, and this time his translator caught part of it. "Never seen fighting like. How did you know?" Tail smiled slightly. "Humans have been fighting things that want to kill us for a very long time," he said. "We get good at it." Era looked at him with new respect in her eyes. Then her gaze moved past him, to the cave entrance. Her face grew serious. "More come," his translator picked up. "Many more." Tail checked his rifle's charge. "Then we better be ready." For 3 days, Tail and Era hid in the cave system. The Void soldiers searched everywhere, but could not find them. Tail had covered their tracks well, using skills he had learned in Earth's harshest battlefields. During this time, his translator learned more of Era's language. They could now talk, though some words still confused them. "We cannot stay here forever," Era said on the third night. Her soft glow lit the small cave where they rested. "My people need me." Tail nodded. "My ship is still hidden where I left it, but the enemy is watching it. And my ship is broken beyond repair," Era said with sadness in her voice. Tail thought for a moment. "Maybe not everything is broken. We could use parts from your ship to improve mine. Make it faster, stronger." Era looked at him with doubt. "Your ship is primitive compared to ours." Tail smiled. "Humans are good at making things work with what we have. It's how we've survived so long." They waited until the moon's dark side faced away from the battle still raging in space. Then they crept back toward Era's crashed ship. Void soldiers had set up a small camp nearby, but only 2 guards watched the wreck. "I'll handle them," Tail whispered. "When I signal, run to the ship." Before Era could object, Tail moved like a shadow between the rocks. He came up behind the first guard and struck quickly. The alien fell without a sound. The second guard turned just in time to see Tail's fist coming toward his face. Tail waved to Era. She ran to the ship, her movements graceful despite her still healing wound. Inside the wreck, Ara led Tail to the engine room. "This is what you need," she said, pointing to a small glowing cube. "Our power core. It is still working." Tail carefully removed the cube and other parts Era pointed out. She explained what each piece did while he packed them into a bag. "Why do you help me?" Era asked suddenly. "Your people and mine have never met. This is not your war." Tail kept working as he answered. "Where I come from, we have had many wars. Too many. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing while others suffer." Era was quiet for a moment. "My people, the Lumina, have known peace for 1,000 years, until the Void came. We were not ready for war." "Humans are always ready for war," Tail said with a grim smile. "It's both our greatest shame and our greatest strength." A loud alarm broke the silence. "They know we're here," Tail said. "Time to go." They ran from the ship toward where Tail had hidden his craft. Behind them, Void soldiers shouted and fired weapons. Energy blasts hit the ground around them. They reached Tail's ship just as a Void fighter flew overhead. "Get in," Tail shouted, opening the hatch. Era looked at the human ship with wide eyes. "It's so small, so basic." "It's about to get much better," Tail said, holding up the bag of Lumina parts. "Now hurry." Once inside, Tail worked quickly to connect the Lumina power core to his ship's systems. The ship hummed with new energy. "Hold on," he said as he took the controls. The ship rose faster than it ever had before. 3 Void fighters appeared on the screen, moving to block their path. "They're too fast," Era said. "We cannot outrun them." "Maybe not," Tail agreed, "but we can outsmart them." He turned the ship straight toward the moon's surface. "What are you doing?" Era cried. "Something they won't expect," Tail said. At the last second, he pulled up and skimmed along the moon's surface, flying through a narrow canyon. The Void fighters followed, but they were too large to maneuver in the tight space. One crashed into the canyon wall. Another pulled up too late and hit a rock formation. "Humans are crazy," Era said, holding tight to her seat. "That's our secret weapon." Tail replied with a grin as they shot out of the canyon and up into space, the last Void fighter falling behind. The stars opened up before them, but Tail knew they couldn't go home yet. His ship had taken damage in the escape. "Where to now, Princess?" he asked. Era pointed to a distant star. "There. We will find friends there." 3 days later, Tail's ship approached a small rocky planet. It looked empty and dead from space. "Are you sure about this?" Tail asked. "I don't see any signs of life." Era nodded. "That is the point. Our base is hidden underground. The void has passed this planet many times and found nothing." Tail flew the ship toward the coordinates Era gave him. As they got closer to the surface, a hidden door opened in the side of a mountain. Tail guided the ship inside. A large cave waited for them. Several Lumina ships sat in neat rows. People who looked like Era moved about, working on the ships or carrying supplies. All of them had the same glowing skin, though none glowed as brightly as Era. When they landed, a group of armed Lumina surrounded the ship. Tail could see their faces through the window. They looked shocked. "They have never seen a human before," Era explained. "Stay behind me." They stepped out of the ship. The Lumina soldiers kept their weapons raised. Era spoke to them in their language. The translator picked up only parts. "Royal Princess, human ally, helped escape." A tall Lumina male stepped forward. His armor was more detailed than the others, and a scar ran down one side of his face. "I am Jun-Ho, commander of this base," he said. His voice was deep and suspicious. "Princess Era, we thought you were lost in the battle." "I would have been, if not for this human," Era said, gesturing to Tail. Jun-Ho looked at Tail with cold eyes. "Humans are known to us only through old stories. Primitive, violent, unpredictable." Tail met his gaze without blinking. Sometimes being unpredictable is an advantage. Jun-Ho turned back to Era. "Princess, your father, the Emperor, will be relieved to know you are safe. But bringing an outsider here puts us all at risk." "He saved my life," Era said firmly. "And his ship, though simple, defeated 3 void fighters with ease." This caught Jun-Ho's attention. "How is this possible?" Before Tail could answer, an alarm sounded. A Lumina soldier ran up to Jun-Ho and spoke quickly. Jun-Ho's face grew dark. "The Void has launched a major attack on our home world. The royal city is under heavy fire." Era gasped. "My father is safe for now," Jun-Ho said, "but our defenses are failing. We must send help." "I will go," Era said. Jun-Ho shook his head. "It is too dangerous, Princess. The Emperor ordered me to keep you safe if we found you." "I will not hide while my people die," Era said. Her glow brightened with her anger. Tail stepped forward. "Let me see your ships and weapons." Jun-Ho frowned. "This is not your concern, human. I've fought in more battles than I can count," Tail said. "Maybe I can help." Jun-Ho looked like he would refuse, but Era nodded. "Show him." They walked through the base. Tail studied the Lumina technology with interest. It was advanced, but focused on defense, not attack. "Your weapons are designed to disable, not destroy," Tail said. Jun-Ho nodded. "The Lumina do not believe in killing if it can be avoided, but the Void has no such limits." Tail picked up a Lumina rifle. "May I?" After a nod from Era, Jun-Ho showed Tail how it worked. To everyone's surprise, Tail learned quickly. Soon he was handling the weapon like he had used it for years. "Impossible," Jun-Ho muttered. "It takes our soldiers weeks to master these weapons." "Humans adapt," Tail said simply. "It's how we survive." A plan began to form in Tail's mind. He turned to Era. "Your people lack fighting experience, but they have good technology. With the right strategy, we might be able to help your home world." "What do you suggest?" Era asked. "A small team," Tail said. "Fast and quiet. We slip past their main forces and hit them where they don't expect it." Jun-Ho laughed without humor. "And who would lead this suicide mission?" Tail met his eyes. "I would." Era looked at Tail, then at Jun-Ho. "I will go with him." "Princess." "No," Jun-Ho began. "Prepare a ship," Era ordered. "The human comes with us." Jun-Ho wanted to argue, but knew better than to challenge the princess. He bowed stiffly and walked away. "He doesn't trust me," Tail said. "He will." Era replied. "When he sees what you can do." The small luminous ship moved quietly through space. It did not look like a warship. It looked like a simple trade vessel. This was part of Tail's plan. Inside, Tail, Era, Junho, and 4 luminous soldiers prepared their weapons. Junho still watched Tail with doubt in his eyes. "We will reach the Void command ship in 10 minutes, said one of the Lumina at the controls. Tail checked his borrowed Lumina rifle one last time. "Remember the plan. We get in, find the information, and get out. No big fights if we can help it." Junho frowned. "Running away is not the Lumina way." "It's not running away," Tail said. "It's being smart. Pick your battles." Their ship approached the massive Void command vessel. It was huge and black, with sharp points sticking out in all directions. It looked like a giant metal spider. "Sending the trade codes now," said the pilot. The Void ship let them land in a small side bay. So far, the plan was working. The Void thought they were just traders bringing supplies. "Masks on," Tail said as they prepared to leave their ship. All of them put on breathing masks that would hide the luminous glowing skin. They stepped out into the Void ship. 2 guards waited for them. "Identification," one guard demanded. Junho stepped forward with fake papers. While the guard looked at them, Tail moved quietly to the side. With 2 quick strikes, he knocked both guards out. "Drag them into our ship," Tail ordered. "Quickly." They moved through the dark halls of the Void ship. Tail led the way, using the ship maps Era had helped him study. They avoided the busiest areas. "The main computer room should be ahead," Tail whispered. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed in the hallway. "They know we're here," Junho said, raising his weapon. "New plan," Tail said. "Junho, take 2 men and cause a distraction on the lower level. Ara and I will get to the computer room." Junho hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful with the princess," he said before running off with 2 soldiers. Tail and Ara, along with the 2 remaining soldiers, moved quickly toward the computer room. They could hear shouting and weapon fire from the lower level. Junho's distraction was working. They reached a large door marked with Void symbols. "This is it," Era said. One of the Lumina soldiers worked on the door lock while the other kept watch. The door slid open. Inside, 3 Void technicians looked up in surprise. Before they could sound an alarm, Tail shot all 3 with stun blasts from his rifle. "Hurry," he said to Ara, who ran to the main computer. She connected a small device to the terminal and began downloading information. "This will tell us their attack plans, their weaknesses." The Lumina soldier at the door suddenly fell, hit by enemy fire. Void soldiers were coming. "We need more time," Era said, watching the download progress. Tail grabbed the fallen soldier's weapon. Now he had 2 rifles. "Get behind the console," he told Era. "Keep working. I'll hold them off." The first Void soldiers appeared at the door. Tail fired both rifles at once. His shots were perfect. The soldiers fell. More came. Tail kept firing, moving from one side of the room to the other, never staying in one place. The Void couldn't pin him down. "Done," Era shouted. But there was a problem. More Void soldiers blocked their escape route. They were trapped. "Now what?" Era asked, fear in her voice for the first time. Tail looked around the room. He saw a small door on the far wall. "There," he said. "Where does that go?" "Maintenance tunnels," said the remaining Lumina soldier. "But they run through the whole ship. We could get lost." "Better than being dead," Tail said. He fired a few more shots to keep the Void back, then ran to the small door. It opened with a hiss. "Go," he shouted to Ara and the soldier. They crawled into the narrow tunnel. Tail came last, sealing the door behind them. They moved through the dark, tight tunnels for what seemed like hours. Ara used her natural glow to light the way. "Look," she whispered, stopping suddenly. Below them, through a grate in the tunnel floor, They could see a massive room. Hundreds of Lumina people were locked in glass cells. Their glow was being drained into machines. "My people," Era said, her voice breaking. "They're harvesting their light." Tail looked carefully at the room layout, the guard patterns, the machine design. His soldier's mind saw something. "Era," he said quietly, "I think I found their weakness." Tail, Era, and a remaining Lumina soldier made it back to their ship. Junho and one of his men were already there, waiting. They had lost one soldier in the escape. "Did you get the information?" Junho asked. Era held up the small device. "Yes, but we found something worse. The void is capturing our people and draining their light. We've known they take prisoners," Junho said, "but we didn't know why." "Now we do," Tail said, "and I think I know how to stop them." They flew back to the resistance base. On the way, Tail explained what he had seen. "The void's power systems run on the energy they steal from your people, but they don't understand the power they're using. They'd waste most of it." "How does that help us?" Junho asked. "The machines they use have a flaw," Tail said. "The energy storage units are all connected. If one fails, they all fail." Era looked at him with new hope in her eyes. "So we only need to destroy one." "Exactly," Tail said. "But getting to even one won't be easy. They're heavily guarded." Back at the base, they studied the information Era had stolen. It showed the Void's attack plans, ship movements, and base locations. "They're planning to attack our last 3 cities in 2 days," Junho said, his face grim. "We don't have enough ships or fighters to stop them," Era added. Tail looked at the maps and battle plans. "You don't need to stop all of them. You just need to hit them where it hurts." He pointed to a large void base near the Lumina homeworld. "This is where they process the energy they steal. If we can destroy it, their ships will lose power." Junho shook his head. "It's too well defended. We could never get close enough." "Not with a large attack," Tail agreed. "But what about a small team? A few ships, flying in a way they don't expect." "What do you mean?" Era asked. "The Void expects you to fly in formation, to follow the same patterns you always have," Tail explained. "But humans learned long ago that sometimes the best way to win is to be unpredictable." Tail began to teach the Lumina fighters a new way to fight. They practiced flying their ships in wild, random patterns. They learned to attack from different angles, to fake retreats, to use the enemy's strength against them. "This goes against all our training," one Lumina pilot complained. "That's the point," Tail said. "The Void knows your training. They don't know mine." Not all the Lumina could adapt to Tail's methods. Some found it too strange, too against their nature. But those who could formed a special team. Junho watched with growing respect as Tail trained the pilots and fighters. "You really think this will work?" he asked. "I've seen smaller forces win against bigger enemies using these tactics," Tail said. "On Earth, we call it guerrilla warfare." "Guerrilla?" Junho asked, confused. Tail smiled. "It means fighting smart when you can't fight strong." The night before the mission, Era found Tail sitting alone, looking at the stars through a window. "Are you thinking of your home?" she asked. Tail nodded. "I wonder if they think I'm dead." "After we win this war," Era said, "we will help you return to Earth." "If we win," Tail corrected. "When we win," Era insisted. "You have given us something we didn't have before." "What's that?" Tail asked. "A new way to fight," Era said, "and hope." The next morning, 12 small Lumina ships prepared for the mission. They had been painted black to blend with space. Their weapons had been modified based on Tail's suggestions to pack more power. Tail stood before the pilots and fighters. "The Void thinks they know the Lumina. They think you're predictable. Today, you will show them how wrong they are." Junho stepped forward. "I will lead the attack." Tail nodded, then turned to Era. "You should stay here where it's safe." Era's glow brightened with determination. My place is with my people. I will fly with Jun-Ho. Tae-il knew better than to argue. Then I'm coming too. To victory, Jun-Ho said, holding up his fist in a very human-like gesture. To victory, the fighters echoed. It was time to see if human tactics could change the tide of an alien war. The 12 small luminous ships moved silently through space. They flew in a loose, random pattern that would confuse enemy sensors. Tae-il sat beside Era in the lead ship, with Jun-Ho at the controls. Void base ahead, Jun-Ho said quietly, as if the enemy might hear him through the vacuum of space. The base was massive. It looked like a black metal star with 8 points. Void ships moved around it like angry insects. Remember the plan. Tae-il said over the radio to all ships, fly the way we practiced. Don't bunch up. Hit fast and move on. They've seen us, one pilot reported. Void fighters coming our way. Begin attack pattern, Jun-Ho ordered. The luminous ships suddenly scattered in all directions. The Void fighters, expecting them to stay in formation, became confused. They didn't know which ships to chase first. Tae-il watched the tactical display. It's working. They're splitting up too. The luminous ships dove and twisted, never going where the Void expected. They fired quick shots at the enemy, then changed direction before the Void could fire back. This is amazing, Era said, watching as another Void fighter exploded. We've never fought like this before. Humans learned these tactics fighting each other, Tae-il said. Sometimes being smaller and weaker forces you to become smarter. 3 luminous ships broke through the Void defenses and headed for the base. They fired at the outer rings, causing explosions that lit up space. We're hitting them hard, Jun-Ho said with rare excitement. They don't know how to respond. But the Void quickly adapted. More fighters poured out of the base. A luminous ship exploded in a flash of light. We need to hit the main power center now, Tae-il said, or we'll lose too many ships. Jun-Ho nodded and turned their ship toward the center of the base. 2 other luminous ships, all of them. There, Era pointed to a large dome in the middle of the base. That's where they process the energy they steal from my people. Void guns fired at them from all directions. Jun-Ho flew with skill Tae-il hadn't seen before, dodging and weaving through the deadly fire. I can't get a clear shot, Jun-Ho said as they passed over the dome. Tae-il looked at the ship's weapons. The cannons are too big for a precise hit. We need something smaller. An idea came to him. The ship's escape pod. Can it be launched manually? Jun-Ho looked surprised. Yes, but... And it has its own small engines. Yes, but why wold? Jun-Ho's eyes widened as he understood. You want to use it as a bomb. Tae-il nodded. I'll set it to fly straight into the dome's weak point. If you're in the escape pod when it launches, Era began. I'll jump out at the last second, Tae-il assured her. While Jun-Ho kept flying in unpredictable patterns, Tae-il went to work on the escape pod. He rewired its systems and programmed a simple flight path. Ready, he said, climbing into the pod. Fly as close to the dome as you can. Jun-Ho brought the ship down toward the base again. They took several hits, but the shields held. Now, Tae-il shouted when they were directly over the dome. Jun-Ho hit the launch button. The escape pod shot out from the ship with Tae-il inside. It sped toward the dome as Void guns tried to hit it. At the last moment, Tae-il opened the pod door and jumped out into space. The momentum carried him away from the pod. He watched as it crashed into the dome and exploded. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cracks appeared across the dome. Light poured out through the cracks. The whole dome collapsed in on itself. Chain reactions spread through the base. Explosions followed explosions as the energy containment systems failed. Tae-il floated in space, his oxygen running low. He felt cold, but he could see the Void base falling apart. He had done it. The Lumina might win now. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, He saw a ship coming toward him. Not a void ship. A Lumina ship. Era's ship. "Hold on, human," her voice came through his helmet radio. "We're not leaving you behind." A rescue beam pulled him toward the ship. As he reached safety, the last of the void base exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Jun-Ho was waiting when Tae-il was brought inside. The Lumina commander did something Tae-il never expected. He bowed. "The Lumina owe you a debt," Jun-Ho said. "We would have never thought to fight this way." Tae-il nodded, too tired to speak. "We just received a message," Era said, her face bright with hope. "The void ships attacking our home world have lost power. Their whole fleet is in chaos. And my father wishes to meet the human who helped make this possible," she added with a smile. The royal city of the Lumina glowed like a jewel in the night. Tall towers of crystal and metal reached toward the stars. But many buildings were damaged. Signs of the void attacks were everywhere. Tae-il stood with Era and Jun-Ho in the great hall of the palace. The emperor sat on a throne that seemed to be made of pure light. He was older than most Lumina Tae-il had seen, his glow softer but somehow deeper. "So you are the human who helped my daughter and turned the tide of our war," the emperor said, his voice gentle but strong. Tae-il bowed. "I only shared what humans have learned through our own wars, Your Majesty. And it has given us hope," the emperor said. "But I fear it may not be enough." He waved his hand, and a large map appeared in the air. It showed the Lumina homeworld and the space around it. "The void has called all their forces here," the emperor explained. "They lost one base, but they have many more. In 3 days, they will attack with everything they have." "How many ships?" Jun-Ho asked. "Over 1,000, the emperor said. The room fell silent. The Lumina had less than 100 ships left. "We need more help," Era said. She turned to Tae-il. "What about your people? Would Earth send ships to help us?" Tae-il thought for a moment. "Earth would help if they knew what was happening. But my ship's communication system can't reach that far." The emperor looked interested. "We have long-range communicators, but they would not work with your Earth technology." "Maybe they could," Tae-il said, "if we combine them with parts from my ship." For the next 2 days, Tae-il worked with the best Lumina scientists. They combined the quantum communicators of the Lumina with the simple but hardy equipment from Tae-il's ship. "It might work," the lead scientist said, "but we can't be sure." Tae-il recorded a message explaining the situation and asking for Earth's help. He included data about the void and their weaknesses. They sent the message, but there was no way to know if it reached Earth. All they could do was prepare for the coming battle. The Lumina gathered their remaining ships. Tae-il trained more pilots in human tactics. Era worked with her father to evacuate as many civilians as possible to underground shelters. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Void Fleet appeared. It filled the sky like a dark cloud. "All ships, prepare for battle," Jun-Ho ordered from the command center. The Lumina ships rose to meet the enemy. They flew in the unpredictable patterns Tae-il had taught them, but there were too many void ships. For every one they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "We can't hold them much longer," Jun-Ho reported. In the palace, Tae-il stood with Era and the emperor, watching the battle on large screens. "My people are brave," the emperor said, "but we are not warriors like you, Tae-il." "Being a warrior isn't always a good thing," Tae-il replied. "We had to learn to fight because we kept fighting each other." A loud alarm sounded. A group of void ships had broken through the defenses and were heading for the palace. "Your Majesty, you must get to safety," a guard said. The emperor shook his head. "I will not hide while my people fight." "Father, please," Era begged. "No, my daughter. A true leader stays with his people to the end." Tae-il looked at them both. These peaceful people were facing the end of their world with such courage. He wished his own people could have come to help. Suddenly, one of the scientists ran into the room. "Something is happening," he shouted, pointing to the screens. New ships were appearing at the edge of the battle. Not void ships, not Lumina ships. They were blocky, practical-looking vessels with a familiar symbol on their sides, the Earth Defense Force emblem. Tael's heart jumped. "They came," he whispered. The Earth ships fired into the Void fleet from behind. The enemy, caught by surprise, broke formation. A voice came through the communication system. "This is Commander Sujin of the Earth Defense Force. We received your message, Captain Kim. Earth stands with the Lumina people." Tael grabbed a communicator. "Commander, the Void ships can't handle unpredictable attack patterns, and their energy storage systems are connected. If you can hit those, entire groups of ships will lose power." "Understood, Captain. We'll show these Void creatures how humans fight." The Earth ships moved in ways the Void had never seen. They didn't use fancy technology, but their tactics were unpredictable and effective. "It's working," Era said, her face bright with hope. Tael nodded. The Void doesn't know how to fight two different species at once. For the first time since the war began, the Lumina had a real chance of victory. The battle raged around the Lumina homeworld. Earth ships and Lumina vessels fought side by side against the Void fleet. The once unbeatable enemy was now confused and breaking apart. "The Void command ship has been spotted," Commander Sujin reported. "It's hiding behind their main fleet." Tael looked at the tactical map. The command ship was massive, at least 3 times the size of any other Void vessel. "If we destroy that ship, the rest might retreat," Tael said. "But our ships can't get close enough," Junho pointed out. "There are too many defenders." Tael thought for a moment. Then he turned to Era. "What if we use a small ship, something fast that they won't pay much attention to?" Era nodded. "My royal shuttle. It's small but fast, and it has special shielding." "I'll go with you," Tael said. "As will I," Junho added, surprising them both. 3 warriors are better than 2. The Emperor did not try to stop his daughter. He knew how important this mission was. "May the light guide you all," he said. They took Era's shuttle, which was indeed small and fast. Sujin ordered the Earth fleet to create a diversion, drawing Void ships away from their path. "There's a weak spot at the bottom of the command ship," Tael explained as Junho flew them through the chaos of battle. "If we can plant explosives there, we might disable the whole ship." Era checked the weapons. "We have 2 plasma charges. They should be enough." They flew through laser fire and explosions. Junho's flying was perfect, using all the unpredictable moves Tael had taught him. Soon, they were under the massive Void command ship. There, Tael pointed to a spot where several energy conduits met. "That's our target." Junho brought the shuttle close. "The ship's shields are too strong here. We can't fire through them." "Then we'll have to go outside and plant the charges by hand," Tael said. "That's suicide," Junho argued. "No, it's what warriors do," Tael replied. "Then I'm going with you," Era said firmly. They put on spacesuits. Era's glowed softly, making her easy to see. They each took a plasma charge and prepared to spacewalk. "I'll create a distraction," Junho said. "When I draw their fire, you 2 place the charges." Tael and Era stood in the airlock. "Ready?" he asked. Era nodded. Her eyes were bright and determined behind her helmet glass. The airlock opened, and they jumped out into space. They used small jets on their suits to fly toward the target. Junho flew the shuttle away, firing at the command ship's guns. As planned, the Void focused on him, ignoring the 2 small figures moving beneath their ship. Tael and Era reached the energy conduits. They worked quickly to place the charges, but as they finished, a Void patrol spotted them. "Go," Tael shouted to Era. "I'll hold them off." Era hesitated, then flew back toward the shuttle, which Junho had brought around again. Tael fired his suit's small weapon at the approaching Void soldiers. He hit several, but there were too many. A shot grazed his suit, tearing the material. Air began to leak out. Suddenly, Era was beside him again, She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the shuttle. "No warrior left behind," she said. They made it to the airlock just as Taeil's oxygen reached critical levels. Junho flew the shuttle away at top speed. Charges set. Taeil gasped as they pulled off their helmets. "Detonate now." Era pressed the remote trigger. Behind them, the plasma charges exploded. The energy conduits ruptured, setting off a chain reaction through the Void command ship. They watched from a safe distance as the massive ship broke apart from the inside. When the main reactor blew, the explosion lit up space like a new star. Without their command ship, and with many of their vessels disabled, the remaining Void ships began to retreat. The battle was won. 3 days later, in the Great Hall of the Palace, the Emperor of the Lumina signed a formal alliance with Earth. Commander Su-jin represented humanity, with Taeil at her side. "Today marks the beginning of friendship between our worlds," the Emperor said. "Together, we will rebuild and ensure the Void never threatens either of our peoples again." After the ceremony, Era found Taeil looking at the stars through a window. "Will you return to Earth now?" she asked. Taeil shook his head. "Commander Su-jin has asked me to stay as Earth's first ambassador to the Lumina, if that's acceptable to you." Era's glow brightened with happiness. "More than acceptable." Junho approached them. He looked different now, more relaxed. "The Emperor has placed me in charge of a new military force, one that will train in both Lumina and human methods. I would value your input, Taeil." Taeil nodded. "I would be honored." As they stood together, looking out at the stars, Taeil thought about the strange path that had brought him here.